Hey everyone, welcome to Pilot to Co-Pilot, a leadership podcast with me, Antonio Neves, and Jason Lindstrom. Now today we're joined with a very special guest, Susan Tulsa McGinty, a Chief Growth and Advocacy Officer at the University of Illinois Community Credit Union. And today we're talking about those what the heck moments in leadership, the ones that catch you off guard, force you to reevaluate everything, and often end up shaping exactly who you are. Our hope is with this episode to dive into what it means to lead with transparency, honesty, and of course, grace, especially when the unexpected shows up. So let's get into it. And Jason, I want to start with you because as we were talking about Susan, you said two words that both begin with F to describe her. And one was friendly and one was fierce. Now, a lot of people would think those are polar opposites, but tell me a little bit more how you come to see her as friendly and fierce.
She's one of the most friendly people that I know, just always gracious. And we've known each other for quite some time in a mentor-mentee type relationship. So the friendly part is really easy because if you ever meet Susan, you know that she is just friendly and outgoing that way. The fierce side of it is in getting to know her, I recognize that she dives into everything like head first, feet first, you name it. Like she gets a task and just knocks it out of the park. Her credit union's got some fantastic things that she's been given and she's at the helm of. And it's because of that fierce, that tenacity, but also the personality. The being friendly really matters. It makes a difference. And all of that is just such pluses. So those are two good F words that I can use to describe Susan. So welcome, Susan.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That is I love that. I really do. And I will tell you, the fierceness has been something that I've really cultivated. And not in a fierce, I'm going to be really rude, but in a fierce that, life is short and we get opportunities and I don't want to squander anything. And I feel like a Pac-Man sometimes and I just want to eat everything up. So that's probably part of the reason why I'm saying, sure, can we do that? Yeah, we can figure it out. So let's go for it.
I like that. I'm about to have this visualization of the Pac-Man game and eating up the cherries and the strawberries and all the things that show up. But I'm curious, when we talk about friendly and fierce, a lot of people think those things are mutually exclusive. And the truth is, being a leader, of course, you have to be fierce sometimes. You have to be direct. And I'm curious, Susan, from your perspective, selfishly in the work that I do, I'm a firm believer that most people don't need another pat on the back. They need someone actually to look them in the eyes and tell them the truth. So in your career, how have you approached that by being fierce, direct, but simultaneously, I'm assuming compassionate as well?
Yeah. And I love the word compassionate versus empathetic, because I think that's where you get into some polarity when you want to have clear and kind. The reality is, in our industry, we are responsible to our members, and these are our members' dollars and cooperatives. So it's very easy for me to be fierce in defense of that, so that when we're charging ahead, this isn't a personal thing. This is, hey, whatever we do, I don't want to squander our members' resources. I don't want to squander opportunities, and I want to maximize all of our opportunities in the name of relevance and doing more good, which is our rally cry here at the credit union for our members. Where did my fierceness come? I got to tell you, it wasn't always there. My career started pretty much at 40. I went back to school at 38. I was very happy to be a stay-home mom. And in full transparency, I was going through not a great marriage and needed to make a major change. And I realized I wanted to be able to provide for my children because that was not going to happen if I wasn't going to become a breadwinner myself. Scared to death. We had just moved to Champaign, Illinois, which is in the backyard of the University of Illinois. Didn't have a degree. I had been in the military, and I wasn't really great at school. So I was going back to school probably the fifth or sixth time, actually had more credit hours than I gave myself credit for, took a little job in the community as a part-time bookkeeper, making $10 an hour, and ended up becoming the executive director 6 months later, and literally got a lot of rope and had imposter syndrome for probably the first decade of my career. Now, imposter syndrome really made me just work harder and harder because I always felt like I needed to prove myself. And so, what came in getting grounded in the realization that I earned that title at that business association, came over to the credit union to help them launch a affinity partnership with the University of Illinois. Again, felt like, wow, everyone's doing me a favor without recognizing I had cultivated a network and actually had the consumer insights of our community that lended back to the credit union. But because I was so green, I felt very much like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Now I want to prove that you didn't make a bad job. That actually put a lot of pressure on myself. And I've had to do a lot of work to get into the position where, you know what? These titles, these responsibilities were not just given to me, I earned them. And that has been an evolution. And I think we see that in our executives when you get started in your 20s, so that by the time in your 40s, you figure it out. Well, remember, I'm in my 40s with the same sort of conflict of trying to understand the fact that, it wasn't imposter syndrome and I was fortunate enough. So through that journey, it made it easier for me to have the confidence in my leadership, to have the confidence in what I'm doing. And a shout out to ACU, the former CUNA, because doing 5 years there really helped solidify a lot so that when I came back to this credit union, I just I didn't hedge. I didn't qualify what I wanted. I started finding a voice of just being more clear and direct. And actually was even challenged by some of my colleagues saying, what do you want? And realizing I didn't need a preamble. I didn't need to, explain why I'm here asking. I just needed to own my voice. And that has been an evolution.
This is why I said fierce. That story is, I think a lot of leaders have to go through challenges and have that a little bit of turbulation. And I think I've discussed before, like I've been laid off from 2 credit unions before. And so it builds that fierceness. And, I see that in Susan, and I guess that's why I called you fierce, Susan, is because of that. And that tenacity that you needed at, kind of entering into the executive leadership type role, like at 38 years old. We have young listeners I know that are listening to this podcast. And, I've talked to some of them and said, never let somebody say you're lucky. You're lucky where you are, because I really think that you earn your role, and to get there, you have to be fierce. You have to go through some turbulent times to get to that level where you can run a credit union, you can run an organization, you can lead a department. I think we like to see people that raise their hand and ask to take on more responsibility and do that. And a lot of times we're like, oh, you'd be a great manager. And they may be great at scheduling things and, making sure a branch or an office or something opens on time, but they don't have the leadership traits. And you learn those leadership traits through going through turbulent times, a bad marriage, childbirth, raising kids, the military, all those things you talk about. And so it's fascinating to me that you as a leader, you come with that fierceness because of the turbulence that you've had. And I think there's something to be said for that. I don't know that leaders are often just handed the keys to, a $600 million organization or $1 billion organization, or, when Steve Jobs was running Apple, I don't know that he was just handed the keys and like, here you go. I think there had to be some things along the way. So I love the explanation that you gave. It's great.
I'm curious for both of you, because we're getting human here, and we talk about, I think we bifurcate work and life. And obviously, for me, there's like they're together, like they're seamless in many ways. We can try to shut off that maybe we're in a tough marriage. We can try to shut off that when we leave work, we have to go take care of older parents. We can shut off, or we can try to shut off that maybe we're experiencing some type of loss or hardship. But I'm curious for both of you, can you talk about the added value of going through challenging times outside of the office and what they bring into you in the office and how you communicate, how you deal with leaders and how deal with employees and how you process things?
Yeah, I am happy to do that. I mean, we all have it. And I think that's where we can cultivate empathy because even though we hadn't been through somebody's exact moment, I never had a mom that was battling cancer and she's at end stage. But I've been through other challenges. I've had a son that was really ill and went through a challenge. Um, but at the same time, in all of those challenges that we have, in some ways, work is kind of a blessing because you show up and you check it at the door. And for me, it becomes a beautiful diversion. And I get to lean into what I'm doing. And then for about 8-ish hours, I'm able to really focus on a task at hand that I mostly can control, not all of it. But really, it just then kind of gives my brain a break before I go out into my personal life and have to deal with that marriage that was failing or that child that was ill or that parent or, a lot of other challenges. That's where, for me, I can be very empathetic. Why I say I believe I am compassionate because we still have a job to do. We are still responsible to our members, our communities, our mission. And to me, that's our jobs, that's our vision, that's what we do. And all of us credit unions that are thriving, Jason's credit union, my credit union, our credit union, is this innovation culture. And the speed of business is faster today than ever before. It's not changing. And so I am empathetic to what you're dealing with. And I am compassionate that now I am asking you to show up and to let's get into your job because we do have a job to do.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I think, a workplace is a place of solace where you can get away from the daily life and you can come in and you have projects, you have people counting on you. And you have those things. And I've always talked about as a leader, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's what empathy and compassion is, right? So if you're leading, you've got to be able to compartmentalize your life in such a way that you come in and you take off the bad hat that you might have had at home or um, however you want to describe it. I don't have a bad hat at home right now. It's great. But, it's one of those things I
Oh,
think.
I do too. I'm very fortunate.
Hey, wait, me too. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
me too.
We are three fortunate people.
Right. But I think for some, it's a way that when you come into work and you've got your daily schedule or list of projects to do, that you may be leaving home that has a bad situation in it. Whether it's, trying to deal with a teenager that is not going the direction that you want them to, or even a 20-year-old or 22-year-old or whatever it might be. You deal with those things at home and it might be like just grating on you, but you get to work and it's your solace. It's your happy place. And it is a place where you can concentrate on projects and you feel accomplished and energized to go back and then deal with what you might have going on at home. And so I think it's really important as a leader to compartmentalize and yes, that stuff is still going on in the background. And like you said, Susan, we serve our members, other businesses serve their customers and you don't want to bring those feelings to work. You want to be sure that you're leading with purpose and promise and being sure that you're helping to motivate the team.
Yeah, a few things come up. So I apologize in advance for our listeners. Listen, I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a leadership speaker. That's what I do. So some people are about to get lit up. Get ready. But as you guys were talking about work and being a solace in that place where we go somewhere, like a situation may be a certain way at home, maybe we don't feel respected or appreciated at home, right? I always like to say, if your family and friends didn't know you, they would be quite impressed with you and who you are if they didn't know you and how you show up. Susan, you said something really fascinating that stood out to me. And listen, I have this gift, and this gift is I name books. So I can hear something and it's someone's book title. I've named many friends' books. I think your book is going to be called Work is a Blessing. I think that's going to be your book title, Work is a Blessing. And what a good reframe. People need to hear that, because I think people complain so much about these jobs that pay bills, provide health cares, pour into retirement, all these fun things. And we complain about that job, that leader, this and that. And it's a reminder that sometimes a dream job can be a job that you love, or one that allows you to do what you love. So work is a blessing. What a great reframe for all of us. On all of those notes, something that was mentioned at the top of this podcast was the mentor and mentee relationship between the two of you. And if there's a consistent theme of young folks that I interact with at credit unions across the country and beyond, is how can I get a mentor? How can I learn from someone? And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, you don't go up to someone and say, will you be my mentor? Very rarely does that pan out. Could you two talk a little bit about the genesis of your relationship as mentor-mentee, not just how it started, but then what does that look like in application? Is it a monthly call on the books? Are each of you available to one another for those text messages or voice notes? So for people who want that type of relationship.
I remember when I first met Jason. I was working at the Credit Union National Association, and he was the chair of the Marketing Business Development Council. And it was even before I was working with Open Your Eyes to a Credit Union. And what struck me about Jason is that he's fun, but got after it. He's fun, but got after it. And, he had this vision, and he was a big personality, and boy, he was making things happen. So I remember, I think it was Vegas, where we had talked a little bit. And now at this point, I'm with Open Your Eyes to a Credit Union. And, that was another one of those imposter moments for me. Like, how did I find myself leading this big national effort? But it has, I understand. I was chief marketing officer. It made perfect sense for me to have been leading it. But I remember being on stage sharing with the peers that I admired, that I thought were the leaders in the industry. And here I was sharing about a very important effort about how to raise consideration on behalf of credit unions throughout the country. Very important, something we still struggle with. And after that, I remember being nervous and anxious and get up there, and I did my thing. And the first person who came up to me after that was Jason. And Jason said, "You did a really great job. You explained it. This is not easy to explain." And it meant the world to me. And there was a spark. And so, I went back to my credit union, and Jason, you're welcome to pile on. And then we saw each other, and I think I was I think I was fierce, and I pursued you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how it happened. And I think we never once said will you be my mentor, or, hey, do you want to be my mentee? We never even really talked about that. It was more of a friendship kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think I recognized the fact that, you had said your story and told me your story of how things were, and that you were looking for some guidance. I said, I'd be more than happy to help you. And so, yes, we've had text messages. We've tried to meet at GAC. We've missed each other at GAC, which is the Government Affairs Conference, for those that don't know, our biggest conference in DC. And then we've talked at that time. But we do have regular calls. It's on our calendar, and either one of us do have to miss because of other commitments and that kind of thing. And we've talked through some personal things as well as, work-related things. And it's just good to have people, especially as you become a leader. I think I've mentioned this before, a CEO, you can be in a lonely place because people don't want to talk to you. You're the CEO. Oh my God, I can't go in and talk to him. My door is always open, and I tell the staff that. And I love having conversations, and I love leading and mentoring. But I think it's from a mentorship perspective, it has to be driven by the mentee and what they want to get out of it. And so I think a lot of times when we get on the call, I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Susan?" And she goes right into "Hey, I've got this one particular issue," or "I've got something that I'm thinking about. How did that work with you and your credit union?" And so it's driven by that way. And I get just as much out of it, I think, that she does out of the relationship that we have. Because we are able to have those kind of conversations that are private but meaningful and actionable. She's given me some leads on some things. I've given her some leads on things that you've implemented at your credit union because of me, and vice versa. I've taken things back to our credit union here. And so I think it's just that, it's a friendship more than a mentorship. But at the same time, my role is I want to be able to help other people get to a level that I've achieved. I love the success that our organization has had, and I always put that on my team. It's not me. I'm just a cheerleader here. Like, I just get it going. And I don't take any credit for anything that Susan's done, but I'm the cheerleader for her, and I want her to do well. And she's had some tough things too, like, hey, how would you handle this? And how would you handle that? And we've talked it through. And I don't know if I give the best advice. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. But I think the experience that I've had in my almost 30 years, starting out as a teller and working my way through, I've been through a lot of different scenarios. And I've seen what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I think it's fantastic to pass along that knowledge along the way. And I think every leader that gets into at least a CEO role or even a senior leadership role, should try to mentor others. And it's that empathy and that compassion that you have for others, that you want them to succeed and you want them to do better. One of the reasons we put the podcast together was to help maybe give some tips out there to younger leaders that might find us on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or wherever. And I think it's good to have that to let other.
I agree. Well, a few things jump out for me there. One, I love that she describes you, Jason, as someone who's fun, but gets after it. Like, those are the kind of people you want in your life. Sometimes the people that just get after it, they're great. Don't get me wrong, but you want to have fun too. Just to recap a couple of things that stood out for the listeners that really, really stood out. First, shout out to the Governmental Affairs Conference. I may or may not have hosted that bad boy 7 years in a row. So I'm gonna give a shout out to everyone there.
I love seeing you on stage.
Oh, what a blast.
Yeah.
What an amazing time. But the key takeaway, just listening to you two talk, is to develop that mentee relationship is ask for advice, ask for expertise first and foremost. I think people don't do that enough, that they're really, they're not specific. They're extremely broad. Second, as Jason really hit on, it's a reciprocal relationship. I think great mentor-mentee relationships, both parties get something out of it. So you pour into each other. I want to get into something that we teased in the intro of the show. And I said, life sometimes in work, we experience some, what the heck kind of moments. Is this really happening? Did I just hear that? Did this person just say that? Or other things as well, sometimes out of our control. And I'm curious if either of you, and sorry to put you on the spot, Susan, if you don't have something, maybe Jason does. I'm curious, do you have any what the heck kind of moments in your leadership journey and takeaways or how you handled it?
I've had some where I've experienced it, and I'm sure I've created some myself. And I think that's what's important to understand is that we're all on this journey learning as we go. So, when a leader is a leader, it's not like there's a manual. When I had to take over mortgage, not like I got a manual. You kind of had to figure some things out. So one of the things that we have to be mindful of as leaders is that our words carry so much weight or perceived weight. And sometimes in an off-the-cuff moment, you say something where, the person who reports to you, who's working with you, really this was meant as an off-the-cuff moment. That you take that and you're like cooking, like, oh my God, now you're stewing on it. And you give it more energy and intention than it deserves, instead of looking for intention in other people's mistakes.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that too, is that, I always talk to my team here. I do this thing called Pastries with the President, where I bring in new hires and we get to eat pastries. I never eat them because I'm healthy that way, but we provide them. And I say that we're all over 18, so we're all adults, but we all here at the organization are human. And so that means we can make mistakes. And as long as you're not intentionally defrauding the organization or stealing from the organization, we will try to have grace as much as possible, because there are those off the cuff moments. There are times where I might be heated about some particular issue and I just blurt out like, "Oh my God, what are we doing here?" Something like that, right? And somebody will take that as like,
Passionate. That
yeah, but it's someone may take that in such a negative way, like, "Oh, he doesn't like what I said, or doesn't like what I did, or doesn't like the project results." And it's about letting everybody know that we are all human, and then having that transparency to go back and say later on, or if you're a leader, you talk to somebody and say, "Hey, I really misspoke there. I didn't mean it that way. What I was trying to say was this." I think that happens every now and then in relationships with spouses too. You say something and like, "Oh, geez, I hurt my wife's feelings by saying that I didn't want to do this particular thing," whatever. But I think it's coming back and saying that, "I didn't mean to say it this way. This is a better way to say it." But I think just having that grace to deal with those kind of issues and let everybody know that we are all human at this organization, and humans by at fault make faults, have issues, don't do things all the time that are correct. And leaders are the same boat. And like you said, Susan, there's no manual. There are tons of management books out there, and you could read to your heart's content. And there's philosophies, there's directions, there's all this. People say, don't be friends with your team on Facebook. And we've talked about this before. I'm going to be friends with people on Facebook because I'm a human and I want to be interacting with my team as adults and as humans. I feel like if you're attached to a manual, there's going to be a scenario that comes up that's not in that manual, and you're going to have to deal with it. And
in this day and age, we see that inherently. But where the what the heck
yeah,
is, like when you found yourself in that moment, then you're like, and you find yourself like ruminating on it, then I think a very disarming way of saying, "What the heck, man? What did you?" Instead, it was like, "What the heck was that all about?" Because really, we know our colleagues, we know best intentions, we're working with good people. Because if you're not there and there's not value alignment, then, that's an opportunity for another culture. But I'm blessed to be in a culture that, my leaders and my colleagues, I love and respect and admire them. So when we have this moment, then you can circle back and be like, "What the heck, man? What was that all about?" And it just becomes very disarming, because really you're like, "I'm really not, did I hear that right?" Or I don't want it to give intention. And then it just gives space to be like, "Oh yeah, no, that was not, did not come out the way I wanted." And then it becomes this opportunity to actually get closer. But that's our responsibility as a leader, to recognize our words hold so much weight. And the higher you are, the more weight. So being really mindful of that. But then, we're human, so we're going to do it. But then as, in that leadership role in your leader, it's also understanding grace and then bridging the gap by saying, "What the heck was that all about?"
right.
And doing it sorry,
I think we have another book title. What the heck, man? I think that'd be a good
man.
book title. And I do gotta, just for the record, hope the stenographer is writing this down, that Jason is friends on Facebook with his colleagues, but we're not friends yet, Jason. We'll have to remedy that on Facebook. Okay, we'll make that happen.
Yeah. I follow you on Facebook, but I think it's the Antonio Neves. Whatever.
That's some other guy. Susan, you said something interesting that stood out to me when I asked you about, what the heck moments. You said, one, I've created them. Two, and second, you said something really powerful, looking for intention. And I think that was so important, as Jason elaborated on. I'm curious for you, Susan, and Jason, you as well. What allowed for that self-awareness? When did you get to a point in life where you could say, I've created those too, but also that really adult move that you said, I know this person may have misspoke or said something that wasn't cool, and you're looking for attention, providing that grace. What allowed you to have that type of self-awareness?
Oh, wow. That's great. I'm still working on it. So I think this is, a journey, not a destination. It is something I'm really mindful of. I know, because I am fierce, that I can be very clear and direct. That, sometimes my words don't land the way I want them to. And I have so appreciated having vulnerable trust with my teams that I've had my team members saying, "All right, girl, what was that all about?" And I've been able to reflect back and saying, "Oh yeah, that I didn't, yeah, I said that. I own that. My bad. I apologize. And now let's kind of clean that up and give me the opportunity to re-speak, because we are all communicators. We're saying a lot of words. We're listening to, but off the cuff moments happen. And to me, what I try to achieve, and it's actually a newer concept, it's with the 5 dysfunctions of teams. And it's this concept of predictable trust where, it's predictable. We know we're all going to show up for work. We know we're going to do the task at hand. But I think that real magic happens in vulnerable trust. And that's owning your mistakes. And as a leader, when you can own your mistakes and say like, "Oh man, I really screwed that up," then it actually gives your teams permission to own their mistakes and not be perfect either. And if you truly are on this path of innovation culture where you're always trying to do relevance, none of us are perfect. And the quicker we can create vulnerable trust, and that's only through owning mistakes, saying, "Hey, my bad. I know I've created a what the heck moment. I'm going to, apologize for my what the heck moment." And I think the more I've been able to own my mistakes, I've been able to give grace when I see those things happening to me. And I know that if I do an off the cuff moment, it is not from a spirit of negativity. It's not a bad intention. And that's allowed me to say, don't look for intention in other people's mistakes.
That's good. That's really good. On that note, Jason, I'm curious. This is such a learning moment, and I want to maybe make it applicable for people who are listening. By the way, the book you mentioned, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, folks should definitely get that book by Patrick Lencioni. He has a bunch of other books. They're fantastic. I want to make this tactical, and I'm curious for both of your perspectives. And we'll start with you, Jason. So there's a moment, something said in a meeting, in passing, at lunch, a conference, you name it. It's a what the heck or what the heck man or what the heck girl kind of moment. And you go to that person in private and say, what the heck? But their response, Jason, is to immediately get defensive. How do you approach that person, that team member, that employee, where it was a mistake? You're not looking for intention, but they get defensive. How do you disarm that? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's really just about having that truthful, honest conversation. Defensiveness is always going to be the first thing. And so sometimes I might even say like, don't get defensive about this, but this is the situation, or this is what I observed. And I think that we can do a better job. Again, I use the term "we" a lot, but it is about that. It's about having that relationship and the team. And so I think it's really just be prepared for that defensiveness to happen. And I think as a leader, that's what you're always trying to do, is you're trying to anticipate how someone's going to react. And a lot of times you can, and a lot of times you can't anticipate it. So I think it's just a matter of having that true, honest conversation. Like, "Hey, I understand you're being defensive at this. I would be too." Put yourself in their shoes to say like, maybe this is how you should have handled it, for example, and give an example of what the issue might be. That's typically how I do it. Does it always work? No. Sometimes they're going to storm out or they're going to be upset. And then I might revisit it once they've cooled off. We experience that a lot with my 18-year-old stepson, who's going to be 19 soon. He gets really defensive right away. Like, "Oh, mom, yeah, Jason, what do you. And we let him chill for a little while. And then when he's like ready to talk about something, then we talk about it. So it kind of works the same way in the workplace sometimes, that, let somebody cool off a little bit, plant that seed, and then revisit it later on. Or they may come in and be like, I hear what you said and I want to change this, or I'm going to make a point, or I'll get an email. Yeah, I agree with what you said, or I still disagree, but you have a valid point and I'll look at it this way. It's just fine.
Anything you'd add to that, Susan?
I actually agree with him, and I also, most of us are not emotionally regulated, and so sometimes we can inadvertently trigger somebody in a way that causes some of this defensiveness. And the reality is, I feel like it's our responsibility to own our truth. And then I also believe in what Jason said. It's, hey, I'm going to give somebody a mountain of grace, and then we're gonna circle back and saying, "Hey, is everything cool? Can we touch on that?" Because, here's the challenge is, you have these stand-ups with our teams. Life happens. I mean, today we had a bit of a crisis where a team moved faster than it was ready for something to go out. And, no limbs were lost. It probably, wasn't as beautiful as we wanted it to be. But, the reality is, I said, I'm like, hey, you know what? This is a great learning moment. We are innovating. We are doing a lot of different things. So there are some good lessons learned here. So let's learn it and move forward. And I'm all about driving balls forward. So it's like, I don't want to get stuck on this. However, I do think it's important to understand what happened, why it happened, and figure out how we can course correct. What I've learned is that people are not insubordinate. There is training gaps, there's knowledge gaps. I truly believe that people want to work with best intentions, and sometimes, we make mistakes. I mean, that's the name of the game. But yes, defensiveness happens. I get that. But I also think, don't end on that note. I agree with Jason. Let things simmer down, and then let's circle back when people are ready to, let's advance the ball at that point.
Let's end on this question because I think it's an important one. And I want to end on an extremely human note. One thing I appreciate about both of you is a question I ask regularly in my workshops across the country is what shows up when you show up? Do things get better or do things get worse? And I know, Susan, when you walk into a room, things get better. Jason, as she described earlier at events, when you walk up, when you show up, things get better. As we talked about, though, earlier, some people are in some tough seasons right now. Some things that maybe they didn't plan for in their lives that are hitting them pretty hard. And they're probably not as playful as they once were. It's hard for them, Susan, to see work as a blessing. And maybe they're getting after it, but they're not having as much fun as they used to. What's a short piece of advice for both of you that you'd have for an individual that's experiencing that? Jason, let's start with you, then we'll have Susan end.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it earlier, is being able to compartmentalize things. I've done that a lot in my life where certain scenarios going on over here, that's in one compartment. I've got this other compartment with work, and that's a different kind of focus. And I do think we are seeing more mental health challenges come into the workplace. We've talked a little bit about work from home, that, a lot of people want work from home, but then they get it and they miss that social aspect. So there is a lot going on. You have the economy, you have political turmoil. I mean, you can go down the laundry list of things that are not right in the outside world that you try to get away from at work. So I think there's just something to be said for that. And being able to, the advice I would give is to look at your job and look at your work and what you're doing and try to remain as positive as possible and compartmentalize those bad things. Yes, they're there, but take that out of the workplace and concentrate on your job. The New England Patriots had a coach for a long time, Bill Belichick, right? And he always said their motto was do your job. And no matter what came into it. So you'd have practice during the week, then you have your game on Sunday. He was a driver of success for the organization. And it was all about do your job. And when a multi-million-dollar player went sideways, he would have no problem benching them for that game as punishment because they weren't doing their job. They were thinking of other things. They were not giving it their all at practice or whatever. So a word of advice, if I want to take a sports analogy like that, do your job, go into work and do your job and try to put everything aside. A lot of times it's hard to do that. But I think successful leaders and successful people in the workplace are able to compartmentalize that and focus on their job while they're at work. And again, like Susan said, no limbs were lost in whatever happened there, and no limbs will be lost here at work too. So it's a matter of doing your job. And I think that if you can compartmentalize that and just for that 8 hours that you're here, or 8.5 or whatever, you're able to do that, it'll make you successful, and you get a breather. You get a breather from what's going on in the outside world.
Susan?
I really believe that when you hit challenges, especially challenges that keep happening, right? If you're always in that same communication challenge, it's like understanding, all right, I might be the common denominator here. So I feel like I need to learn more, to do better. So there's this constant like moment of growing. And, does that mean a book? I wish I was more of I listen to podcasts, but not in the car because I love music, because I listen to music. But there's so much good development out there. If you're a reader, there's beautiful books, there's articles, there's inspiration everywhere you go. And for me, when I was able to truly learn, if it's not in my control, let it be. And that has been something that's been really freeing. The other thing that I've had to learn is don't go down a rabbit hole. Stay very focused in the moment and in the present in areas that we have. And I think sometimes we leaders, especially when you're running, a big financial institution and you're making decisions, you're trying to make as perfect of a decision as possible. Well, guess what? You're never going to have, all you have is the information you have right now. So make the best decision that you can today, and then be prepared to course correct tomorrow. So read, develop, do your job, like Jason said, because there's action promotes, kind of helps shift you a little bit. And then also the area of just understanding that you can't control everything. And you have to make the best decisions you can with the moment you have. Recognize that. And then course correction is always there.
Well, hey, I think that's a beautiful place for us to end on. Susan Tolson McGinty, thank you so much for joining us on Pilot to Co-Pilot with me, Antonio Neves, and Jason Lindstrom. We look forward to seeing all of you, or rather, letting you hear our voices here in the Zoom again in the future. Thanks again for joining us.